we see this headline, Rick, to add to all the day's interesting headlines about earthquakes in New York, but then also that the CIA warns Iran will attack Israel within 48 hours as revenge for consulate strike. And again, what we have in that, I mean, that's about all the info we got. They quote a couple former CIA officials. They talk about, again, we know there was the consulate strike. We know that there were Iranian Revolutionary Guard generals killed in that strike that was in Syria at an Iranian consulate, and that strike was carried out by Israel, so that the retaliation would be targeted at Israel. What we don't know is, where that retaliation could be and what is targeted for Israel. But I think, it presents one of those matters when we see one of these stories, hey, this would help people out too, and kind of run like this in the news. What do you think people's first reaction should be? I mean, because it's pretty, scary headlines. It has a specific timeline, and it's pretty, pretty scary stuff. Iran's going to respond with something, deadly, and that's all they give us.
Well, first of all, let's talk philosophically about why we have intelligence. Why do the American people pay taxes, hard-earned taxes, in order to have intelligence agencies? The answer is that our intel and all of the collections that we do is designed to keep America safer. It's designed to give public policy officials who are making the choices about our safety, it's designed to give them the best information possible so that public policy officials can react and make sure that they're keeping America safe. So when you have information like this, it's supposed to go to the public policy officials to react. Now, let's remember that for 2 months, we heard intel officials and the White House talk constantly about the fact that there would be a war in Ukraine. We heard Joe Biden say the Russians are coming, the Russians are coming, the Russians are coming into Ukraine. And we didn't react. We didn't, surge diplomacy. We didn't try to do anything other than buckle down and prepare for war. And I find that to be wrong. I find it to be immoral. When you have information that there is an attack coming or a plan of action, the United States of America needs to react. So if we know that Iran is going to attack our ally Israel, we better be doing something about it. And from this report, I'm not even sure that people are taking it that seriously.
I mean, it looks like the only the country taking it seriously is Israel. That they've, there's a number of their embassies that they've evacuated in response to this. So obviously someone got this out because they believe something needed to be said publicly to warn people, possibly, and that could be, again, because they don't think that the U.S. is taking it seriously enough. And in fact, we're seeing a lot of criticism of what Israel did, and not so much about the fact that Iran is continuing to carry out, escalating the situation between Israel. In fact, we know, Rick, we go back to October 7th. This was all being backed by Iran. Hamas wouldn't have had the abilities to even carry out these attacks without Iran's support. So if you're talking about who's escalating this conflict, it's the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Look, I think that the reason this information is leaking out is because there are a lot of people within the intel community, within the diplomatic community, within the Pentagon community, who are very concerned that the Joe Biden administration is too weak, that they're not responding, that they're sitting on the sidelines and watching, and they're very concerned about it. So they're shooting a warning to say, oh my gosh, look what could happen. And hopefully that is enough of a media response where people then have to confront the White House to say, what are you doing to protect our allies? What are you doing to protect Americans in the region? Because we don't know exactly where this attack is going to be, and we've got a lot of Americans in the region,
including U.S. troops. And then ultimately, Rick, this again, it seems to go to this point of, is the administration, because I mean, reading into this, what we're seeing is Israel is being blamed for this potential for an Iranian attack. So now that if you target Iran as a terrorist state and you target any of their actors, which you've been in an administration that did as well, that somehow it's your fault that Iran is a terrorist state and that you're provoking them, and that it's Israelis' fault that I guess that October 7th occurred.
We're never going to convince the left-wing types and the media types who just always want to blame America and blame Israel. But the reality is in the Trump administration, we had Iran without money. We froze all of their assets. There were sanctions on them. There were worldwide pressure, and it was working. And in the Biden administration, they decided to open up the sanctions, open up cash and credit to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars. And now we're in a position where all of that money that was unleashed by Joe Biden is being used against America and America's allies in the form of war. We would not have had October 7th, 181 days ago, if Joe Biden had not funded this Iranian regime, who then went out and started funding all their terrorist proxy groups.
Yeah, Hamas had much better resources, much better capabilities, and then of course and also knew that they were willing to carry out an attack like this and suffer the repercussions. And when they talk about, of course, how horrible things are in Gaza, but they knew what would happen if they carried out an attack that extreme on Israel. If it was, in their minds, successful, if they killed that many Israelis and Jews in one day, that what would happen in response. And we're still seeing, even today, Rick, these articles, that it's true that there's not a ton of Democrats elected who take the pro-Hamas position, but what the Democrat Party is concerned about is that there are more and more Democrats who just stay quiet on the issue, that they don't want to speak on the pro-Israel position. And, who's going to win those elections inside the Democrat primary? Not an expert on their primaries, but I do see that silence more and more. Then you see the speech by Schumer, and you say, wow, it feels like they're under a lot of pressure to somehow be critical of Israel, even if it's being critical of a specific Israeli.
Look, the rational foreign policy people are not being listened to. The people who are being listened to right now by the Biden team, and it's not Joe Biden, he's a shell of a politician right now. It's Anthony Blinken, it's Jake Sullivan, it's that whole team. What has happened is the foreign policy rational thinkers have been shoved aside, and the political people are making the decisions. The political people who care about Michigan and Detroit and want to win an election, so everything is political. Those are the people who are calling the shots on Israel right now, and that's very sad to me, because it's been 181 days. We still have hostages. We still have American hostages that are being held by a terrorist organization. And we should be hearing about the hostages every single day. We should have a countdown clock on every single media outlet telling the American people how many days that we've had people held against their will, Americans held against their will by a terrorist organization 3.5 years after Donald Trump brought in peace deals between the Arabs and the Israelis.
I mean, look, I think when you get that info from Rick T, we could look through all these issues. One is, being in those rooms, making those decisions that could lead to either those consequences or prevent these kind of actions that we saw under President Trump, but also not being afraid to take acts like taking out the head of the Revolutionary Guard, which the Trump administration did and made the decision to do, which the Iranians are still utilizing as a reasoning for their attacks. Though, I mean, it's a pretty clear difference. It's again, you could be an allied country and have differences, and what you do is you handle those differences behind closed doors, and you can have really strong differences. You could have really big arguments, but you don't have to make them public. When you start making public speeches like Chuck Schumer about Netanyahu, it's not like they were ever politically on the same side. Netanyahu was always more on the right side. Yeah. Schumer was more on the left. But the fact that Schumer thinks that's going to help him politically in New York.
Yeah, exactly. That's when you see that the movements are all about politics. It has nothing to do with actual conviction. Because Schumer, for the longest time, was at least someone who you knew as the sort of
you would think he'd keep that behind closed doors.
Was sort of the Zionist Democrat.
If he disagreed, keep it behind closed doors. Yeah. Let the Israelis know. You can have those. That's what you're supposed to do with allies. You're not supposed to air if you're doing the airing of public grievances. The idea is that you're no longer the same kind of ally anymore.